Hey Josh, how are you?
Doing well, Justin. How are you?
Good. Again, looks like you're traveling like you always are.
Story of my life. I've been in. I went skiing in the mountains this weekend, and then was in Denver. Denver's about to get somewhere between 20 and 60 inches of snow,
Oh,
so
snap.
that's going to be epic.
That's crazy because back here, it's like 67 today.
Yeah, it started snowing as I left, which wasn't supposed to start till Friday. So I think they're in for a really fun event.
Oh, that sounds horrible. Honestly, right now, I'm kind of over the whole snow thing right now.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Well, hey, so another episode of Overrated game.
I'm game.
You got
Let's
some.
do it.
You got some minutes.
Yeah.
All right. This one's not going to be nearly as a softball as the last one. All right. So let's start off. Overrated, underrated, edge computing.
I would say that I don't know that I can intelligently talk about that. So I would just say that it's probably rated right now. I'll put a cliff note in that all of those kinds of things. There's this level of how much data am I providing to the machine, and how much am I exposing myself by doing those kinds of things. And I just worry, I had a conversation with a friend the other day, and his wife has worked for Whole Foods for many, many years. Loved her job there. It was amazing. And then when it was bought by Amazon, it turned into this constant game of data collection, so that they could essentially replace people with machines, and Whole Foods can eventually become a black box with no windows that delivers the Whole Foods foods to you directly. And I think there's a danger in moving that direction constantly, where we collect data at the speed of light to quickly replace people.
Right.
And obviously that's been the story of industrialization as a whole. When we look at things like robotic machines building cars and all those kinds of things, but typically those jobs were replaced from a manual labor standpoint to a programming and computer engineer standpoint, and the people who service and maintain those machines. But I am a little concerned about what it means for us when we're that connected, or when you have companies like Amazon trying to pretty much own your persona in a way.
Right. So that's really interesting. Next would be crypto.
I think it's underrated, and I know it's volatile. And I know that, honestly, for some people, it's really scary. But I think crypto as a whole is something that we need to stabilize money in the long term, and to provide more security about money. And right now, you look at the Great Depression, and you look at how scared people were to put money into certain bank accounts and things like that. And we've done a good job of providing security, I suppose, for our money in banks. But I think that's been questioned a lot by people lately, because of inflation and deflation and all of these kinds of things that play into what is your dollar actually worth. And at the end of the day, is your physical dollar actually depreciating at a level that is faster than inflation even.
Yeah. I think the thing about crypto that makes me really intrigued about it all is it's kind of that gold standard thought process, where it's like you had a certain amount of money, that was backed by gold, and like you couldn't really make more money without devaluing, everything, which isn't really the case now with how we do our finances. But it's like there's only so many Bitcoins, in Bitcoin, type thing. And like a handful will come out more, but it's the same thing as like if we start mining gold, but there's a finite amount of it. Like you can't just magically make more Bitcoins appear. There's a process to doing that, and you can only get so much of it. And I think that makes it seem in the long run as more like the fact that you have people like Elon and some of these other really large investment firms now going into it. It's making me feel more secure that, hey, this is something that's catching on. People are actually using it, and I think it's going to be viable long term. So I think it is underrated, like you said.
Yeah, I'll tell you though that I think that Bitcoin is overrated. I think the idea of crypto is underrated, but I think that that Bitcoin specifically is overrated. Um, and I think because it was the first major player to the game to be something like this. But I think, and I don't know that I believe that, Elon said that Dogecoin is going to be the people's currency. Because there's a limitless supply of Dogecoin, I think that's a dangerous game as well, right? I mean, that's essentially what we're doing in the United States by just printing more money so that we can put it out there, right? And so that's an interesting too. But I look at things like Ethereum, and I think there's future. Sorry, I keep getting phone calls.
That's why we're dropping you.
Let me see if I can put on Do Not Disturb, and yeah, okay, there we go. I apologize. First world problems. No, but I think that Ethereum may be the very viable future of crypto for us right now, and I think other things may pop up. There's just so much skepticism and things surrounding Bitcoin. I mean, the valuation of Bitcoin combined with the who actually created it, and like, is Satoshi alive? Did he actually do it? Does China own it? All of those things are really scary and interesting things that I think are really gonna affect the valuation of that currency. And there doesn't seem to be the politics and the weirdness behind Ethereum right now.
Yeah. I honestly, that's kind of where I've been, because I've been like kind of dabbling like very, very lightly in Bitcoin, because it is intriguing to me. But like the more I've been looking into it, the more like Ethereum seems to be a lot more stable. Like you're not seeing as like drastic swings. Like, I mean, it still swings just like the stock market swings, but it's not. I haven't seen it drop, like $8,000 in one day. Now, granted, it's only, I think, what is Ethereum at right now? Like $1,500 or something like that.
Yeah, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, but it is very interesting. So cool. Next one is I'm kind of having the first couple of these are all playing off of each other. So Tesla is the next one.
I think it's rated. I think that the valuation of Tesla is going to probably double if and when full automated driving and self-driving is really released, and it seems like they're really close there. I think the amount of data and intellectual property that they have gathered to allow for that to be there, and the fact that they're not doing it with LiDAR, but they've been doing it with actual sight, and now they're moving into this idea of looking at high-resolution radar to combine with the sight, I think is a better thing. Elon has been pretty open in saying that he doesn't think that LiDAR is really the future of that technology, and I would agree with that on many levels. But we look at the fluctuation in the stock of Tesla, and people go, well, how could it be valued at the level that it is when they're not selling even a fraction of the cars of the big auto manufacturers? And the difference is that the big auto manufacturers are chasing, they all have this goal to go somewhere and to provide fully electric vehicles, and Tesla is the thing that's actually doing that. So if you look at it, they're actually just copying them. So the valuation is more based off of the market value that technology has, not the amount of cars that they're selling.
Yeah, I was gonna say I look at Tesla as more of a technology company than like auto manufacturer.
Correct.
It's just like like Apple is it's a software company that has hardware for their software thought process.
And that's why I say I think they're rated, right? Because you can look at them and go, yeah, people have had complaints about the quality control, and even Elon has been pretty open to say, like, yeah, crap, like our paint process didn't work very well, or like the first Model 3s, like things were really loose and they weren't super tight in the dash, and like we've improved the quality throughout time as we rolled these things out, because the reality is they're learning to be an auto manufacturer.
Right. I mean, they're not General Motors, who's 100 years old.
Correct. But what they do, and they do better than anybody in the world, is produce these electric vehicles that have technology that nobody else has.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I find Tesla just fascinating because of what they're doing and how they're doing it, like how sexy they are, the whole self-driving thing. Yeah, it's all very, very intriguing. So, All right, Marvel Studios.
It's an interesting one. And I'll admittedly say that I have never been a sci-fi / comic book kind of guy. But what has been released from Marvel in the past, let's say, decade, has caught the attention of people like me who were never really connected in that world in terms of reading the comics and doing that. And they're doing an interesting job of telling the story from many different ways. I think I would have said underrated a while ago, but the most recent, so it was the Wonder Woman movie that came out recently, right?
That's DC.
Oh, that's DC. Okay, see, so that tells you how much I know about comic books. No, but I mean, the Marvel movies, like as a whole, have just been really amazing. So I think as a whole, they're probably underrated in that it feels like they're pushing storylines in film in an interesting way.
Yeah.
And they're taking these fictional comic book characters and they're making them real to us, and they're putting storylines that are somewhat applicable to like real life and not just this mysterious comic book world.
So I'm glad that you said that, because me and my buddy Don, it's not that we don't like DC, but like when it's like that, those two opposites, like what's better? Like we've always said that Marvel is better because of that exact statement that you made. Like it is more feasible for me to be Captain America than Superman.
Like I'm literally in Do Not Disturb.
But yeah, like I was saying, is like it's easier for me to relate to someone like Captain America than it is for me to relate to someone like Superman type thought process. And right. Marvel has more characters. Like that's the whole idea behind Spider-Man, is like my kids can relate to Spider-Man because Spider-Man is technically like a 15-year-old kid, being a superhero in this massive city. So it's like it doesn't seem that crazy to them to be like, I could be Spider-Man. Like, obviously they don't have superpowers, but when they're 6 and 7 years old, they don't think about that. But that's been that argument. And then the other thing that you said that I think that I would say is the biggest underrated thought process of Marvel Studios is that the storyline between all of the movies that continues to play out is probably the most underrated thing, in my opinion, because when you watch TV, the reason why TV has kind of had this comeback, like when Lost came out, is that Lost was kind of like, I don't know if they were the first one to do this, but they were the first one to do it really well, where it was like, it wasn't, episode of the week. It was a long story that they were telling you week to week to week, and that made you go, I can't miss this week's episode of Lost, or I'm going to be lost, type thing. And we didn't really see that in TV, and now we see that in like tons of TV now, where it's like it's these giant storylines that they're telling you over the course of time, rather than I started watching a show called Supernatural years ago, and it was like monster movie of the week. It was like every week they fought a monster, and then they started turning into these overarching storylines that went season to season to season to season. And like they had the overline story of the whole season, and then the individual episodes where they fought monsters, so that they kept their base of what they started in, which I thought that was really interesting. But I think the next underrated thing about Marvel Studios is that when they started with Iron Man, they literally didn't own the rights to X-Men, Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, or the Incredible Hulk. The largest properties that are Marvel comics, they didn't own, they couldn't do anything with. And so they turned to their B comics, such as Iron Man and technically Captain America, and Doctor Strange, and they're making billions of dollars off of their B properties. And they made enough money that they were able to buy all of their A properties for the most part back. And they had enough, buying power to, strong arm other studios into letting them use Spider-Man and the Incredible Hulk and so on and so forth. So I think that those are the underrated things that I see. Because I remember not too long ago, our kids hadn't seen any of the Marvel movies, so we watched them all in like timeline order. And my wife was like, "Oh my gosh!" Like she's like, "I didn't realize like these end scenes and stuff. Like you actually like when you watch them like that." She started realizing how much of a giant storyline this was, instead of all these standalone movies. So yeah, I think that's definitely like an underrated thing about them. That and like you said, like you're not a comic book person and you enjoy watching those movies. Like that's hard to do. Like, you know, would you go see the new Star Trek movie that's coming out? You know, probably not.
No, I wouldn't. And like, I haven't seen any of the Star Wars movies, like even remotely in the entirety. Right. So yeah.
So I have a couple more. What do you think? You want to keep going, or do you think you want to call it?
Yeah, we got a couple more.
Okay.
Yeah, we got a couple more.
Cool. Let's go. Let's go a little bit more. Let's go these two right here. Let's go managed services.
Or I had a really terrible experience with managed services.
Well, more clarity, like subscription-based style things. Or like instead of you know, like instead of hiring like an IT person, you're paying a company to do it. Or instead of buying movies now, everyone's buying Disney Plus. Like those are all things I consider to be managed services.
Yeah. I mean, from that aspect, it certainly changed the face of how we watch TV and how we ingest, you know, those kinds of things now. I think that I would say that they're rated. You know, I don't know that the platforms can get much better right now. The diversification in the platform is the part where I wouldn't say that they're, you know, underrated at this point. And what I mean by that is, there are so many platforms that if you're a cable cutter, right, you're almost paying as much money now. If you want to be able to watch all the shows that are popular right now, you have to have so many subscription services that you're really paying for the same thing. And the real challenge is there are many of them that have overlaps. So there are a lot of things, you know, if I go and I look, because I have Hulu Plus and I have Disney Plus and I have Netflix and I have YouTube TV and I have Prime TV, right? And if I look at those things, I can probably watch some shows on 3 of the 5 platforms.
Right.
And so I really want a world in which, you know, I almost want a world in which I'm in more of that pay-per-use scenario. Like I want to be able to just pay to watch a season, and we were kind of on that path with iTunes / you know, whatever, you know, when you could buy the season of Lost, to your point, and I liked that. I like that model, and I feel like we're getting away from that model a little bit of this pay-per-use thing, and we're now more into this, you know, subscription-based thing. And so I don't know where that goes long term, and I don't know how it plays out, but you know, I certainly would love to see it be better.
I mean, and on the employment side, I mean, we're seeing it more and more. What do you feel about that? Have you like really had to deal with any of that?
Yeah, I mean, with my companies and with, you know, that I own and with the companies that I work for, there's this balance between, do you hire people to be on staff or do you utilize subcontractors or external companies, and what does that do for your culture? And so I think it's an important tool for any business to be able to look at and to say, this is something that is a short-term need for me, and if it's a short-term need, it's probably something that you need to have a subscription-based service on, because your model may change. But if it's something that affects your culture drastically, I think that's where you bring things internal. And so does IT affect your culture? You know, if you're a coffee shop, probably not. In all reality, it's a service to your customers and your ability to collect money, so it makes sense. But if you're a tech company, it probably makes more sense to have your IT internal because it's part of your culture of what you do.
Right.
So
yeah, no, that's good. All right, so let's wrap on this one. Automation and manufacturing.
Well, I touched on this a little bit earlier, right? And I think it's underrated. I think it obviously is something that's been very prevalent in the auto manufacturing, in all manufacturing, right? The automation side. But I think it can get a lot better. And I think things like AI are going to help that manufacturing get better to where you can almost I mean, this is a weird thing to say, but like self-heal, in the idea that we start realizing that the machines can start to realize that they're making bad welds without a person inspecting them. And they can correct that on the fly. And I think that level of learning will allow us to have higher quality products at a faster pace with more reliability, overall. And I think a good use case example of this is the audio industry. When we were kids, if you had 100,000 miles on a car, it was pretty much end of life, because the tolerances and all of those things didn't allow for long, they created vibration, and vibration ultimately caused failures in an engine and in drivetrains. When you look today, you can have a car with 200,000 plus miles and it still has life in it, because we've been able to increase the tolerances to such a point that they become very, very reliable.
Yeah, my Chevy Lumina from 1993 had 284,000 miles on it.
Yeah, but when you look at a car from the late 70s or early 80s, that wasn't the same case.
Right.
And so if we can up the game more in terms of that kind of self-learning capability within the manufacturing process, I think we really can make some big strides in what we can do.
Yeah, I think that have you ever heard Mark Cuban talk about automation in manufacturing?
A little bit.
He had an interesting concept where he's like, you have all these companies that are in, Mexico and China and stuff like that. He's like, if we just, really dove into the automation side here in the United States, he's like, you have jobs that would come back because, now a robot can work 24 hours a day with no bathroom breaks, no smoke breaks, none of that. But you also have to employ human beings to maintain those robots and program them and, make sure that they're doing everything correctly. And I piggybacked that off of the comment that Elon made about like the Tesla automation. And he got asked the question of, do you ever see a future where a Tesla is 100% made by a robot? And Elon said that he doesn't think that'll ever happen. And not that he doesn't think, he said that will never happen. And the reason, and he goes into a little bit of a description where he's like, a robot can't track and grab a wire and then track and grab a wire and then put those things together. Like robots are very much like, grab this, move it over here, put it there, and then screw it in. He also made a comment about, putting like a material, like a cloth material underneath something. He's like, if that gets caught, the robot doesn't have an idea that it's caught, and then you have quality control issues. And that's why, you're always going to need someone, a human being, that their brain can track and grab stuff and can recognize that, oh, that piece of cloth got caught on that, fix that so that the quality control is still there. He said that he believes that automation has made it so that we can be more productive and we can make more things quicker. So I think that's where I've always been really interested to see what other people think about those things.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where the AI plays in, and I'm interested to know why he doesn't see it that way. Because I think if machines can learn, they can learn those things over time, and then know what to look out for. No different than the human.
Yeah, and I think that he didn't really go into this detail. Like that conversation was like they were taking a tour of the Tesla factory, and they just like asked that question. He kind of said that, and then they moved on. But if I had to guess from other things I've heard from him, is that AI, like it's learning in the sense of like it's a mathematical process that it's learning because it's an artificial intelligence, so it's computer. What mathematics can't teach you is care. So you can program into it that if you see blank, if your sensor sees this, to fix it. Whereas a human being can go, I could see how a computer wouldn't see that as a problem, but I see that as a problem because it needs a little bit more care. And I think that's kind of what he's getting at, is that artificial intelligence can help solve some of those like in between things, but it can't, and it will never be able to replace the care of a human being for something, I think that's what that's just what I've gathered. He's never officially said that, but that's just like from things that I've seen him say. I think that's kind of what he feels. So maybe I'm putting words in his mouth, but But